I'd like us to look at the question of wealth and the way that wealth is produced and transferred through society. The first thing I want to look at is the way that wealth is composed of goods. So what? What are goods? Goods are things that are good for people. Even if I buy my dog some dog food, the reason that I buy it is because I like my dog and my dog helps me to have a happier life one way or another. I choose to have my dog because I enjoy it. It gives me happiness. Goods always contribute in some way to human happiness, either directly or indirectly. We use the term good in a number of different ways. We use it in a practical physical way. So we talk about small goods. We talk about white goods. We also talk about goods as a moral category, a good man or a good law, as opposed to a bad man or a bad law. We're talking morally when we use the good in this tense. We're talking physically or practically when we talk about a bad lawnmower or a good dishwasher. What is a good dishwasher? A good dishwasher is one that makes my life easier, more enjoyable. It improves my happiness by giving me less chores in the kitchen. We can apply that kind of analysis to anything that is called a good. Small goods is one which has always struck me as rather curious. Salami and things like that are considered to be small goods. That's the part of the supermarket you buy them from. Why are they good? Because eating salami is very pleasant. It makes my life more enjoyable. So goods are always things that have values to humans because they enhance the life of the owner, the consumer, the user. They're related to happiness in some way. We can say, therefore, that wealth, comprised of goods, is always a physical thing, sometimes it's an intangible thing, capable of satisfying some human need or desire. And to test that, you can think of something which we would describe as good, which for whatever reason doesn't satisfy a need or desire. And it's pretty hard to come up with one. In economics, we talk about goods usually in connection with products. These are things which people have produced in order to enhance either the quality of their life or the life of somebody else. Production is a combination of a number of different factors. It's when humans take raw materials, combine it with human labour, usually to some form of a plan, to produce something which is more useful than what they started with. If I spend a lot of time making bricks and then pile those bricks into a shape called a house, put a roof on it, I no longer have a pile of clay. I have something which is going to make my life more comfortable because I now have a house. If I get somebody else to make that house, one way or another, that is a good thing for me. It's meant that that other person or myself has produced wealth by producing the goods. And if I make it myself, that's one thing. If I get somebody else to make it, they have made that good not for their own personal consumption and use, but to make my life better. And the fact that I'm better off for it is one of the nice things about the economic side of society. We exchange our material goods for a better outcome for society as a whole, to improve the common good. Okay, back in the early parts of modern economics, the era of Adam Smith, it was noted that products are made using a combination of human effort, which we'll call labour, either in the form of physical effort or mental effort, usually working on raw materials, and the raw materials always come from the land. And in fact, we're going to define land as any useful resource which isn't humanly produced. So land can also include wild animals, native vegetation, the air, the sea, and so on. That's the economic factor of production called land. So it's fairly broad. Basically, land is anything useful that people don't make themselves. The third part of the productive process is the use of capital. Capital is a fancy name for tools. And so if I've got the objective of getting some coconuts to have for dinner, I can climb up the tree and reach out and push the coconuts off, or I might get a long hooked stick and be able to do the same thing without nearly as much climbing and inconvenience. The hooked stick is a piece of raw material I picked up off the ground, it's a bit of the land that I've maybe cut or adapted in order to work well to go and hook the coconuts off. It's a tool. All capital is like that. All capital is something which is produced by humans using labour and land, raw materials. But instead of being consumed, like the coconut, it's actually used for future production. So the hooked stick is used for the production of future coconuts. That's capital. As well as those three basic factors of production, land, labour and capital, also in recent times people talk about entrepreneurship as a factor of production, or money, or even the community as new factors of production. We're going to look briefly at those, but we're going to spend most of our time focusing on land, labour and capital. By the way, when we look at land, labour and capital, especially with the way that we've defined capital as previous production using land, labour and capital, if you regress that, if you take it back to the starting point, you find that capital ultimately, historically, is the product of some previous exercise involving land and labour. And so out of those three fundamental factors of production, really they regress down to two, land and labour. And we've been looking at possessions or property in land and labour earlier, and this is where this becomes very relevant, because labour basically relates to all those things that are the result of human effort and human activity, human thought. Land is those things that contribute to this productive activity that aren't the result of human agency. And so land, labour and capital actually dissolves or regresses back into land and labour. And so the question of the question of land in the economy is extremely important. So this is the, if you like, the classical productive mechanism. Land, labour and capital all combining in one way or another to make a product. And in that situation, the first economic question we have is the question of what's called distributive justice. Distributive justice is the question of what is the proportioning, the just proportioning of the returns, the profits, if you like, the incomes to the three factors of production. How much should land have? How much should labour have? How much should capital have? We can maybe think of those as percentages of the product. If we get the distribution of wealth, of benefit, right, with respect to land, labour and capital, then we have a just economy, at least as this part of the economy. If we get it wrong, and let's say we give all of the income back to labour, which is one of the things which the communists were wanting to do back in Russia last century, it's unjust. Conversely, if we give it all to capital or all to land, potentially we have other forms of injustice. And so we have to look carefully at this justice issue. Remember that we were explaining the way that when we talk about justice, we're talking about a moral category. The next thing that happens in the economy is it's not simply a matter of land, labour and capital all being combined to produce a product. That product is usually sold on to the consumer. And so if I want a coconut, I might go to somebody who owns a coconut tree, so they own the land. I might get someone else to climb up the tree for me, and so they supply labour. And then they might use the hook stick, that's the capital, and that produces the product. Now, if I want to take those coconuts and walk them down to the local village and sell them, I'm getting the coconuts not for myself, but for some other consumer. And so I'm going to be selling that product to a other party who's going to actually use it. There is an issue in here between the equality between the price for the product, the value of the product, and the price that the consumer pays for it. When I transfer something from one owner to another through a sale, there is a different type of justice which is applicable. This is called commutative justice. Commutative has to do with the idea of communication or sending something from one place to another. Commutative justice is important in trade. Distributive justice is more important in distribution. They're both to do with the question of justice, and so they're both moral concepts. What we're going to do now is just briefly define the categories that we've looked at in terms of the factors of production, and also examine how they are involved in the productive activity. We've already mentioned that land is any resource as it exists without human intervention. It really is fixed in supply. There's only one planet that we live on, which is a concern for our environmentalist friends. Some of it is renewable, say hydroelectricity or wildflowers and so on, but much of it is not, say what comes out of oil mines or what have you, at least according to common thinking today. Strictly speaking, most land must have some labour applied to it in order to satisfy a human need. Now, if you think about it, even that coconut tree might say, yes, I've got the coconuts, but in fact you've got to climb up and get them. There's very little raw materials which immediately and naturally satisfy a human need. Perhaps a cave might satisfy our need for shelter, but it's very, very basic. Most of the things that we use tend to be not simply land. They're mediated through labour and trade and so on, especially in a complex modern economy. Now let's look at labour. How are we going to define labour? Labour is human effort. It's physical and intellectual production. It includes things like design. It also includes, if you like, the higher level labour activities such as management. When we look at the history of economics, we find that value historically has been associated with labour. In fact, just about all the economists held what's known as a labour theory of value up until about a century ago, roughly. Around then, the question of the value of land started to concern economists. And so the labour theory of value was put aside because it doesn't explain land value. And we've already seen that in a sense the market theory we talk about with demand and supply has a very strong labour content because labour is very important in that question of normal cost of supply. With capital, we've mentioned that capital has to do with tools. They are instruments that make our labour more efficient. To a certain extent, we can go back to our primitive definitions of goods and wealth and so on, and say that the producer's life is enhanced by the quality of their tools. The more efficient tools, you give someone a wheelbarrow and they can maybe carry around a couple of dozen bricks or what have you. Give them a semi-trailer or a forklift and they can move tons and tons of the same product with the same amount of effort, or perhaps even less effort. So capital is able to multiply our human productivity. It's the result of previous production, so it's a result of land, labour and capital. And by regress, ultimately, capital, at least conceptually, can be taken back to simply land and labour. Why are we stressing this regress? It's because the real question in economics is the distribution between land and labour. Now let's look at some of these new areas of factors of production. Entrepreneurship is commonly mentioned these days. Why is that? Entrepreneurship ultimately is a measure or return for supernormal profit or economic rent. It's that extra profit that someone makes usually at the beginning of some novel form of production, where the new producer, because of the thin market, is able to make a fairly handsome economic rent simply because nobody else is in production, nobody else knows how to whatever. And the entrepreneur simply takes advantage of the market, makes a lot of money before other people wake up to what's going on and come in and supply more products and so on and bring the price down. Looked at in those forms, we see that entrepreneurship is not actually a factor of production at all. The creativity that causes the entrepreneur to be able to invent that new process certainly is a factor of production. So is the management and the marshalling of the resources necessary to get that production into operation. But we've already seen that management is a part of labour. And the creativity to produce some new process or some new import opportunity or whatever it is, or an export opportunity, that's also a form of labour, either management or physical labour itself. And so entrepreneurship splits into part of it, which is labour, genuinely, and part of it, which is market imperfection. It's only really transient. And in a stable, perfect market economy, which is the economy or the economic system that all of our modern economics assumes, which is what you need to have a just result, entrepreneurship actually disappears. Doesn't mean that you don't have people starting new businesses and inventing new inventions or new processes. It simply means that the reward that those people get is a labour reward, not an entrepreneurial reward. And while that's a subtle distinction, it's a very, very important and fundamental one. Money is often considered as a separate factor of production. If I want to start a business, the first thing I do is march up to my bank and organise an overdraft. I need some money to run my business. Small business, large business, they all need money. And so that suggests that money contributes directly to the productive activity. We have to unpack that a little bit. What do I really need to start my business? Is it money or the things that money can buy? And this is where things get a little bit subtle. It's easy to take the superficial approach and say, well, money, the things that money can buy, what's the difference? I can exchange one for the other. That works to a certain extent. But the real problem there is that's a bit like saying an elephant can produce bananas. You say, how can you do that? Well, if I've got an elephant and I want bananas, I can sell the elephant and turn it into a banana tree, can't I? An elephant does not produce bananas because elephants are elephants. They produce more elephants. Money is like an elephant in a situation where I want bananas. If I want to run my business, no point in having money just sitting under my bed. I've got to go out and use that money to buy things like equipment, office equipment, computers, factories, transport, whatever, and maybe employ labour. It's the labour, it's the computers and the factories and the semi-trailers and what have you that are actually running my business. It's not the money. And this is one of the curiosities about money, that in our world we tend to think that money equals what money can buy, and in fact it doesn't. While I can do that economically or commercially, it's the things that money can buy that actually are important. And so when looking at factors of production, yes, sure, I might go down to the bank to get my overdraft, so I've got money. Does that start my business? Well, I'll never be able to pull a coconut off a tree with a $10 note. I have to turn that $10 note into the tool I want to use. And that leads to a very interesting area that was first investigated by Aristotle, looking at the nature of money, what its uses are, and what its limits are, and how it contributes to the productive activity, productive process. So what we're going to be saying there, or concluding, is that as a factor of production, money, strictly speaking, is not a factor of production. It is something that enables you perhaps to obtain the factors of production, but in itself it's not. Okay, so what do we have? We have this economic process as a exercise or as a system which has two forms of justice built into it: distributive justice and commutative justice. Distributive justice has to do with economic distribution, the allocation of income between factors of production, land, and its return is rent. Labour, its return is wages. Capital, to the extent that we identify capital as a separate factor, its return is profit. Entrepreneurship, we'll normally consider its return as profit, although we've already seen that entrepreneurship is a bit of a problematic factor of production, tends to disappear if you have a perfect market. And of course, money, and the return to money is interest. Ultimately, some form of equity, in other words, economic a just form of distribution, is socially desirable. If I have a situation where all of the return goes to labour, say in a communist situation, that's a very unjust society, because it doesn't return adequately a return to the managers and the people who put up the land or the capital. And likewise, if I have a situation where all of the income goes to capital or to land, and we have a whole lot of starving labourers, again, there is an undesirable social outcome happening there. That's about as far as we need to go there, but I hope that by introducing these two ideas of distributive justice and commutative justice, and unpacking the factors of production, we can see the importance of land and some of the principles that are behind the relationship between land value and the economic problem, especially with respect to humanity, especially since for most of humanity, their income is related to that labour factor.